They laughed when you burned quietly, didn't they? You remember it. The sound wasn't joy. It was cruelty dressed as amusement. Every chuckle, every whisper behind your back. A reminder that people will dance around your pain if it keeps them warm for a night. They watched you fall, not with pity, but with satisfaction, because nothing entertains the weak more than watching strength stumble. You were never meant to be their entertainment, but they made your pain a stage, your scars a spectacle. They clapped for your downfall like it was a show they paid for. And when you tried to speak, they talked louder, because silence makes cowards nervous. They threw words like daggers, hoping one would find your heart, hoping the fire inside you would finally go out. But fire doesn't die that easily. It hides, it waits, it studies, and when it returns, it remembers every name. You learned early. People love the broken, as long as the pieces don't cut them. They'll pat your back when you're down, but vanish the moment you rise. They'll call it luck, not effort. They'll call it arrogance, not confidence. They'll say you changed, because you finally stopped begging for their respect. You learned to smile while bleeding, to bow while boiling inside, to play calm while the storm screamed beneath your skin. Because you knew one thing, rage burns fast. But patience burns worlds. They thought your silence meant surrender. It didn't. It meant strategy. You were collecting scars like evidence. You were learning their language, the tone of betrayal, the grammar of lies. And every time they said, "You can't," you whispered back, "Watch me." Because the best revenge isn't rage. It's evolution. It's not shouting back. It's building higher. It's not proving them wrong. It's becoming untouchable. The day you stopped explaining yourself was the day your silence began to roar. Because the world doesn't fear words. It fears actions born in silence. Remember those who mocked your beginnings. They'll pretend they inspired your rise. They'll call your obsession madness. They'll call your focus unhealthy. But deep down, they'll know the truth. You became everything they said you couldn't, without ever needing their permission. You were the spark they ignored. But sparks don't ask to be noticed. They just wait for the wind. And when it came, it wasn't a whisper. It was a scream from the depths of everything they tried to bury. It was the birth of something unstoppable, something that didn't want approval anymore, just vengeance through excellence. They mocked your silence, your caution, your calm. They didn't know calm was camouflage, that the quiet one always studies first, then strikes last. Every night they slept peacefully. You were rewriting yourself in the dark, turning pain into armor, turning loneliness into clarity, turning fear into fuel. While they laughed, you evolved. While they rested, you sharpened. While they lived for applause, you prepared for legacy. They thought you wanted acceptance, you wanted domination. They thought you'd break. You learned to bend fire to your will. They built your cage out of doubt, but they forgot something. Fire doesn't need space. It creates its own. Now they stare, confused, terrified, watching the same quiet soul they ridiculed walk through their noise with eyes that don't blink anymore. They say, "You've changed." You say, you're right, because the version of you they remember no longer exists. That version died the day you realized pain isn't punishment. It's permission. Permission to rise. Permission to rebuild. Permission to destroy everything that held you small. You've outgrown apologies. You've outgrown explanations. And you've outgrown the need to prove anything to people who never listened in the first place. Now they feel the heat they once mocked. Now they whisper your name differently, not as a joke, but as a warning, because somewhere between the laughter and the silence, you learned to love the fire inside you, not the warm kind that comforts, the kind that consumes, the kind that cleanses, the kind that ends eras. They played with a flame. They thought it was harmless. They didn't see the storm sleeping beneath the ember. They didn't realize the spark they mocked was studying them, waiting for them, forgiving nothing. And when the time came, you didn't speak. You didn't shout. You simply rose. And the world, the same world that once laughed, fell silent. They played with a flame, you whisper, but a wildfire was listening. You died once, not in body, but in faith. The world buried you beneath their expectations. They didn't use dirt, they used disappointment. They covered your light with judgment and your silence with pity. They stood over your grave, calling it a lesson. They said, maybe now you'll learn to stay in your place. And for a moment, you believed them, because that's how the world kills the strong. Not by taking your life, but by convincing you your fight was meaningless. They want your spark to fade quietly, without noise, without defiance, like a match drowned in rain. But ashes are not endings. They are memory, condensed. They are rage, restrained. They are rebirth, waiting for a breath of wind. You remembered every night of doubt, every you can't, every door that closed when you needed just one to open, every fake friend who said they cared, then vanished when the storm began. You remembered how it felt to be invisible, not unseen, but unwanted. You saw them walk past you like your existence was a mistake. You saw how the world only listens when you shine and grows deaf the moment you fall. And that silence was the furnace. You stopped asking for help. You stopped explaining your worth because you realized no one rescues the fire. They only fear it once it escapes. The grave they built for you became your foundation. Every insult became a brick. Every betrayal, a torch. They thought they buried you, but they planted you. And you rose, sharper, harder, colder. They said, you'll thank them one day. You did, not with words, but with your rise. With your silence, with your survival. Because ashes never beg, they remember. They remember the laughter that echoed while you suffered. They remember the pity disguised as advice. They remember the promises that rotted before morning. They remember the faces that smiled when you broke. They remember everything. And when the time comes, when the wind finally returns, those ashes breathe. They reshape. They ignite. That's the secret no one tells you. Destruction is never the end. It's an invitation, a blueprint written in flame, a reminder that the only way to build again is to burn first. You learned that pain is not punishment. It's proof. Proof that you tried. Proof that you cared. Proof that your soul refused to go quietly. You started seeing scars differently, not as wounds, but as coordinates. Each one pointed toward who you were becoming. Each one whispered, "Remember why you started." You became a collector of ruins. Every broken piece of your past became material. Every loss, a design. Every failure, a lesson carved into the bone. And while they moved on, pretending it never happened, you were building something inside, something they would never see coming. Do you know what happens to ashes when lightning strikes them? They turn into glass, unbreakable, sharp, and when light passes through, it reflects everything, even the darkness. That's what you became, a mirror of every betrayal, refined through flame. You no longer carried pain, you wielded it. You no longer feared endings, you made them. Because the moment you stopped chasing approval, you started collecting power. And power born from ruin doesn't negotiate. It doesn't apologize. It simply exists, unapologetically, unbreakably, unbent. Remember this. The same fire that destroyed you will kneel when you master it. The same people who mocked you will rewrite their stories to include you. The same silence that suffocated you will echo your name when you rise again. They'll say, "You've changed." You'll nod. Because you did. You became the sum of every scar they gave you, and turned it into armor. Ashes don't cry for mercy. They don't pray for forgiveness. They wait. They calculate. They remember. Every betrayal became discipline. Every heartbreak became focus. Every mistake became clarity. Every loss became prophecy. You learned that survival isn't pretty. It's not about smiling through pain. It's about staring pain in the eyes and saying, "You should have finished me when you had the chance." You became colder, but not cruel. Harder, but not hollow. You became the kind of storm that doesn't announce itself. It just arrives. And when they finally realize what they've done, when they see what their mockery created, it'll be too late. Because by then, the wildfire won't be seeking revenge. It'll be rewriting the world. You see, that's the beauty of ashes. They don't beg to be remembered. They're memory itself. They're history, waiting to rise again. They're the quiet proof that even in death, you are never defeated. So let them believe you're gone. Let them think they've won. Because when the time comes, and the wind shifts, and the embers breathe again, you'll rise, not as who you were, but as everything they feared you would become. Because ashes don't beg, they remember. You learn the art of quiet revenge, the kind that doesn't shout. It breathes. It moves in silence. It waits, patient, precise, deliberate. You stopped begging for justice. You became it. Not the kind wrapped in law or mercy, but the kind written in thunder and aftermath. They thought you were healing. You were transforming. They thought you were broken. You were building pressure. Because that's what fire does when trapped. It grows smarter. It learns the shape of its prison. It memorizes every weakness in the wall. And the moment oxygen finds it, it consumes everything. You stopped seeking light. You became it. Not the soft kind that warms. The kind that blinds, burns, purifies. The kind that doesn't ask to be understood, only feared. They wanted to see you crawl. Instead, they watched you rise without sound, without announcement. You rose in silence, collecting storms like weapons, forging a will that no flame could extinguish. Every scar became fuel, every memory a spark, every betrayal another match waiting for your hand. You started walking differently, not faster, but heavier. Like every step carried the weight of your rebirth. You didn't chase attention anymore. You attracted it through silence, through focus, through inevitability. The calm one always terrifies the loud, because calm means control. Calm means calculation. Calm means you've stopped reacting and started deciding. They used to call you quiet. Now they call you dangerous, because silence in a wounded soul is never peace. It's power. You became unpredictable, untouchable, unrecognizable. A storm walking in human form. The same hands that once trembled now command lightning. The same voice that once broke in fear now bends the air with authority. The same heart that once begged to be seen now beats like a war drum. You realized something terrifying. You don't need anyone to believe in you anymore. That was the key that unlocked the chains. Freedom isn't found in acceptance. It's born in isolation. You stopped being the victim of their narrative. You became the author of your own legend, and legends don't whisper. They echo, they burn, they endure. You learn that rage, when refined, becomes focus, and focus, when sharpened, becomes domination. They told you to calm down. You did, right before you took over. Every king that ever ruled once stood where you stand now, mocked, dismissed, underestimated. Caesar, Achilles, a Genghis. History doesn't remember the calm before their rise. It only remembers the storm that followed. And you are the storm they didn't prepare for. You stopped defending your peace and started enforcing it. You stopped trying to prove your worth and started embodying it. You stopped asking, why me? And started saying, watch me. You turned your pain into an empire, your doubts into soldiers, your failures into architects of your evolution. Because nothing teaches discipline like disaster. Nothing builds resilience like rejection. And nothing sharpens purpose like betrayal. You understood the truth. Fire doesn't need permission to burn. It only needs space. And once it finds it, the world changes shape around it. You became that fire. Uninvited, undeniable, unstoppable. You no longer fought for validation. You fought for legacy. You fought for silence so loud it drowns entire histories of doubt. You started speaking differently. Fewer words, more weight. Because power isn't volume, it's gravity. Every time you walked into a room, the air remembered your scars before your name. And every eye that once mocked you now looked away, because they could feel it. The shift. That eerie stillness before the thunder hits. You stopped being what they expected and became what they feared. A soul that owes nothing to anyone. A storm that answers to no master. A fire that burns on its own terms. They said you'd fade quietly. Instead, you became the noise that breaks sleep. The memory that haunts regret. The result they can't explain. They wanted smoke, you say, so I gave them lightning. And lightning doesn't apologize, it just strikes. You reach the point no one warns you about. The point where pain no longer hurts, it instructs. where loneliness no longer breaks you, it builds you. Where silence isn't emptiness, it's strategy. You learned to master your shadow instead of running from it. To make darkness your ally instead of your enemy. To understand that monsters aren't born, they're created by people who forget mercy. And now, you've become what you were always meant to be. Not a survivor, but a storm. Not a flame, but an inferno. Not a fighter, but a force. The world looks at you differently now. Not because you changed, but because you stopped pretending you hadn't. You stopped waiting for the world to recognize your worth. You made it impossible to ignore. And somewhere in the distance, the same voices that once laughed now whisper your name like a warning. They finally understand what they unleashed. The quiet one they mocked. The ghost they forgot. The soul they buried, now risen, now roaring, now relentless, and the inferno inside you smiles for the first time. You didn't return with an apology. You returned with silence, the kind of silence that makes the guilty choke, the kind that hangs heavy, like a storm they know they deserve. They expected a broken man. They met a monument. They expected your surrender. They met their consequence, because you didn't come back to explain. You came back to remind. Remind them what happens when you push a soul too far. Remind them that fire doesn't die. It just waits. They built walls to keep you out. You became fire. And fire doesn't ask for permission. It consumes everything in its path. You didn't need validation anymore. You became the standard. Every rule they wrote now bends beneath your rise. Every name they whispered in mockery now trembles when it crosses your silence. You became the storm they swore would never arrive. The kind that turns daylight into ash. The kind that doesn't roar for attention. It moves, and the world kneels out of instinct. You didn't speak vengeance. You embodied it. Every step you took made the earth remember who buried you. And now, the same mouths that laughed your name only whisper it. In fear, in regret, in disbelief. They look at you and call it arrogance. But you know better. It's not arrogance. It's evolution. It's the sound of someone who no longer waits for permission to exist. They wanted to bury your hunger. Instead, it devoured the sky. They wanted to silence your fire. Instead, it burned the oxygen out of their excuses. You became everything they said you couldn't. And worse, you did it without them. You remember when they said you were too emotional, too stubborn, too angry. But those same emotions became your forge. That same anger became architecture. And now they stand inside the empire they mocked. You should have left me in peace. You remind them. Now, I am the consequence. They played with a spark. They thought it would fade. But the spark grew teeth. It grew thunder. It grew memory. And now it burns with purpose, not rage. Because rage is chaos. But purpose is divine. It's focused. It's patient. It's lethal. You used to chase fairness. Now you understand balance. The scales were never equal. So you became the weight. You stopped fighting for a seat at their table. You built your own kingdom. And now, the same people who denied you kneel to the fire they tried to contain. They used to tell you that patience was weakness. Now they see what waiting truly looks like. They see the storm, that learned discipline, They see the fire that learned silence, and nothing terrifies them more than quiet destruction. You became the shadow in their daylight, the reminder that every word they spoke wasn't forgotten. It was recorded in flame. They whisper, "He changed." No, you evolved. You became what the world forced you to be, something beyond their understanding. You stopped existing for acceptance. You started existing for impact. And the moment you did, everything shifted. Because power isn't noise. Power is inevitability. It's walking through their doubt like it never mattered. You didn't return to prove them wrong. You returned to make their truth irrelevant. And now, they watch in awe as you carve your name into everything they once said you'd never touch. Every victory, every breath, every rise is a funeral for their disbelief. They said you were dangerous when angry. They hadn't seen you calm, because calm means you've stopped fighting for survival and started designing your legacy. You no longer need to respond. You are the response. Every success, every move, every silence is a sermon preached in dominance. They wanted a show of weakness. You gave them a demonstration of power. They wanted regret. You gave them reflection. Their own betrayal staring back at them through your triumph. They come now with false smiles, with rehearsed apologies, with our trembling voices asking for peace. But peace is a privilege, and they traded theirs long ago. Because mercy died the day they mocked your pain. Compassion ended the moment they chose cruelty. Now there's only fire, cold, precise, unforgiving. And this fire doesn't burn for revenge. It burns for justice. It burns to remind them that every storm they unleashed found its home in you. They see it in your eyes now. The calm before lightning. The silence before collapse. They finally understand that you weren't rebuilding. You were rising. And when the rise began, there was no ceiling left to stop it. The same hands that trembled in the dark now shape empires. The same voice they silenced now echoes like prophecy. The same soul they discarded now defines the era. They'll call it luck. They'll call it destiny. They'll call it divine timing. But deep down, they'll know it was consequence. You became the result of their cruelty, the reflection of their failure, the cost of their arrogance. And when they ask how it happened, how the quiet one became a force they can't touch, you'll remind them, I warned you. You should have left me in peace. Now they pray for mercy. But mercy is extinct, because mercy belongs to the weak, and you're no longer human in their story. Your myth, your memory, you're the sound of every flame they thought they killed, roaring back in symphony. The fire you carry now burns with purpose. Not rage, not chaos, purpose. You don't need to destroy them anymore. They've already done it to themselves. All you needed to do was rise. And when the world finally noticed, it was too late. They'll tell stories about you. Not as a hero, but as a lesson. The one they couldn't break. The one who turned pain into prophecy. You were never supposed to last. They built their lives on that assumption. But here you stand, not surviving, commanding. They once mocked your silence. Now it's their silence that echoes, long after your name is spoken. Because legends aren't born from peace. They're forged in the noise of collapse. And you, the quiet one, became the storm that rewrote the sky. You didn't rise to prove them wrong. You rose to prove yourself inevitable. Because destiny doesn't argue, it arrives. You stopped being human in their eyes. You became myth. You became warning. You became the sound that generations whisper when they speak of consequence. They'll say, he was ruthless. They'll say, he was merciless. But they'll never admit they made you that way. Because history loves martyrs, but it fears survivors. And you survived too loudly. History remembers the flames that refused to die. You didn't fade quietly. You burned until memory itself bowed in respect. You became more than anger. You became design, destiny, dominion. You learned to shape chaos into architecture, to turn pain into policy, to carve your silence into the foundation of every empire that comes after you. You see, vengeance was never the end game. It was the ignition, the spark that revealed purpose hidden beneath the ashes. You stopped asking, why me? And started declaring, it had to be me. Because not everyone can carry the weight of becoming a legend. Not everyone can wear scars like armor. Not everyone can turn darkness into doctrine. You did. You stopped living for moments. You began living for echoes. Because echoes don't fade when flesh turns to dust. They expand. They grow louder with every retelling. Let them write their tales. Let them edit the truth. Let them paint you as the villain in their comfort stories. It doesn't matter, because your silence will echo longer than their voices ever could. You understood something they never will. That morality bends before power. That mercy is a luxury of those who never bled. That peace is built on the bones of those who refused to stay silent. And you refused. Flames die fast, but wildfires rewrite the land itself. You didn't just survive, you redefined survival. You made it an art form. You turned scars into scripture. You turned endings into beginnings. Now every empire that rises will carry your fingerprints. Every revolution will echo your tone. Every soul that breaks will remember you. The proof that breaking isn't death. It's metamorphosis. They'll try to replicate your formula, but they'll fail. Because what you carry can't be taught. It's born in the collision between betrayal and belief. It's born in the silence after the storm, when only the strong are left standing. They'll build monuments to your downfall, only to realize those monuments cast your shadow. They'll curse your name in daylight, but whisper it for protection in the dark. Because deep down, even they know, you were never just a man. You were an idea wearing flesh, a storm pretending to be human, a consequence pretending to sleep. They played with a flame, you say, voice calm, eyes cold, and the world changed its weather. You didn't ask for worship, you demanded remembrance, and the world, trembling, obeyed. Your presence became atmospheric, unseen but felt, like thunder before it strikes, like a shadow cast by eternity. You turned legacy into your language. You spoke through results, not noise. Through silence, not speeches. Through dominance, not desire. The thrones they built crumble beneath your memory. The crowns they wear rust in your storm. And every generation that follows will inherit the echo of your defiance. Because fire doesn't fear time. It feeds on it. And your fire your hunger, your wrath refined into purpose. It never ends. You are the wildfire that learned restraint. You are destruction that learned to build. You are chaos that learned direction. That is immortality, not living forever, but never being forgotten. You stopped seeking peace long ago, because peace is for those who have nothing left to build. You, on the other hand, became the architect of consequence. A name carved in the bones of time. A lesson dressed in silence. The world doesn't thank its destroyers, but it learns from them. And when it speaks of balance, it unknowingly speaks your name. Because every storm has its origin, and your name was written in thunder. Now, the wildfire sleeps, not extinguished, just patient, waiting for the world to forget, waiting for another fool to play with flame, waiting for history to make the same mistake twice. And when it does, when arrogance once again strikes the match, you'll rise again, not as memory, but as consequence, as prophecy fulfilled. Because wildfires never die. They rest, they rebuild, they remember, and so will you. You stand above the ruins, not with pride, but with purpose. You don't smile, you don't celebrate, you simply exist, and that's enough to shake the ground beneath you. The fire inside you no longer consumes. It creates. It doesn't rage. It designs. It shapes the world in silence, molding it through consequence, not chaos. You were never their enemy. You were their awakening. The mirror they refused to look into. The reflection of every sin they swore didn't exist. Every betrayal became scripture. Every scar, a seal of dominion. Every failure, a Dabedasum throne carved in flame. You learn that being feared isn't a curse. It's a language power speaks fluently. It's the price of standing where others crawl. It's the sound of victory echoing through generations that didn't understand your name. You used to want love. Now you demand legacy. You used to seek peace. Now you command silence. You used to crave belonging. Now you define the world's edges. They'll call you cold. They'll call you distant. They'll call you cruel. But cruelty is relative when the world is built on deceit. The kind smile that betrayed you, that was cruelty. The soft voice that lied, that was cruelty. Your silence now, that's justice. You learned what kings learned too late. That mercy feeds rebellion, and fear ensures remembrance. The world bows not to kindness, but to control. It doesn't kneel before the gentle. It kneels before the unbreakable. And now, you're that unbreakable force. Your eyes don't seek approval anymore. They see further. Through time, through pride, through history itself. You don't walk among men now. You walk beyond them. Because when you burned, you transcended. When they mocked you, you evolved. And when they buried you, you discovered eternity. They played with a flame, you whisper once more, but they woke up something that doesn't die. The air trembles at those words, because it's not rage anymore, it's law. You've become what time itself fears. Permanence. You don't chase redemption, you embody it. You don't beg for understanding, you define it. You've seen too much of mankind to crave its forgiveness. You've carried too much fire to ever be gentle again. Because forgiveness is for those still pretending to be human. And you surpassed that long ago. You became the sum of every pain they gave you, but you refined it into power, into peace, into something godlike. They wanted to see you crawl. Now they can't look you in the eyes, because you are no longer something they can measure, compare, or control. You are the lesson, the warning, the prophecy fulfilled. The storm they joked about became their new climate. The flame they mocked became their new god. And as the smoke clears, you walk through it, not as man, not as monster, but as memory eternal. Because legends don't end. They burn into eternity. They whisper through time, reshaping the world long after the body is gone. And you are the wildfire that taught the gods to fear the spark. You are the proof that silence can scream, that mercy can die, that power can be pure. And as the last ember fades, you remain, not to rule, but to remind that every world built on arrogance will one day meet the fire it mocked, that every name buried in dust will one day speak again through storm, because the wildfire never dies. It rests, it remembers, it reignites, and when it does, the world won't see a man. It will see the truth, that they played with a flame, and the flame became forever.